Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Skull Servant deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because this deck is really fun and just got some new support in the form of White Baking, which is an insanely good card for this deck and is a really funny looking card too. I'm really excited to play this deck because it is probably one of the funniest decks to play with to be able to OTK your opponent, and is just an overall really cool deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell next to become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below where we have all sorts of awesome rewards you guys, like getting your name description every single video, getting a signed card in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Skull Servant, the most powerful card actually in the deck, because this card is basically the central focus of the deck, because it's a skeletal ghoul that isn't strong, but can mean trouble in large numbers. And there is a big reason for that, because the entire deck is based around getting your Skull Servants into the graveyard to use their effect to boost up your copy of your King of the Skull Servant. And speaking of King of the Skull Servant, we're playing that card as a 3-of because it is your boss monster of the deck. So you guys might be wondering, what does King of the Skull Servant do? It gains 1,000 attack for every single Skull Servant in the graveyard, which is an insanely good effect because we play a lot of different Skull Servant monsters in this deck. And now when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. So we have a lot of cards in this deck to boost this card up by additional 1,000. And by the way, this card counts as a Skull Servant while in the graveyard as well. So just with right here, you have 5,000 plus attack points that this card can already get to. We then play 3 copies of White Prince. This card is really good too because what this card does is if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send 1 Skull Servant and 1 Lady in White from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and then you get to banish 2 Skull Servants from your graveyard, and you can special summon 1 King of the Skull Servants from your deck, which is a really good effect just to be able to get you an additional monster on your side of the field and go ahead and get your copy of your king onto your side of the field as well. We then play a single copy, or we play 3 copies of White Mare. White Mare is really good too because it has the ability that while this card's in the graveyard, this card's name is treated as Skull Servant, and you can banish this card from your graveyard to activate one of the following effects. Either select one of your remove from play Skull Servants or White Mares, White Mares and return to the graveyard, or select one of your remove from play Lady in Right or King of the Skull Servant, and you get to special summon them, which is a really good effect just to be able to instantly get you a copy of one of your King of the Skull Servants to your side of the field. We then play 3 of the new copy of White Baking. So this card is probably the coolest card in the entire game, Yu-Gi-Oh! I love the artwork of this card, and it's actually really good because it counts as Skull Servant while in the graveyard, and if a face-up or a level 3 or lower zombie monster you control would be destroyed by battle or by card effect, then you can discard this card instead. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to add 2 monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, except another copy of White Baking, that are either Skull Servant or specifically list Skull Servant in their text, and then you get to discard a card, which is a really good effect just to be able to add something like King of the Skull Servant and your copy of your White Prince, and then you discard this, and then you send Skull Servant and your Lady in White to the graveyard to be able to get additional plays as well, where you already have like 4,000 damage engraved, and you search this card out of the deck. So you're getting a lot of ways to actually make this deck consistent, which is really cool. We then play 3 copies of White Princess. White Princess is really good too because she has the ability that this card's name becomes Skull Servant while in the graveyard, and if this card is normal or special summon, you get to send 1 White Prince from your deck to the graveyard, and then during either player's turn, you get to send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and all monsters your opponent currently control lose attack and defense equal to their own level/rank times 3,000 or 300, which is a really good effect because if they're level 10s, they lose 3,000. If they're level 4s, they lose 1,200, which is a really good effect just to be able to just lower those monsters' attack points to be able to get through them with your copy of your King of the Skull Servant. We then play 3 copies of Lady in Right. This card is really good too. She counts as Skull Servant while she's in the graveyard, and also face up level 3 or lower zombie monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle and are unaffected by the effects of spell and trap cards, which is a really good effect just to be able to have an additional monster. She's probably the creepiest of all the cards in this entire deck, and just is an overall really neat card overall. We then play 2 copies of Mizuki because basically it's Monster Reborn if you banish it from your graveyard. And then we play 3 copies of Unizombie as well. Unizombie is becoming less and less needed in this deck, even though Unizombie is like one of the best zombie cards in the entire deck, because the more archetype support that this deck gets, the less it just needs generic stuff, which is kind of cool. And it has the ability that you can target 1 face up. Basically you can send a zombie from your hand to the graveyard to increase its level by 1, or send a zombie monster from the deck to the graveyard to increase its level by 1, which is still pretty good, but you still still kind of, I lean a little bit more heavy towards the white baking now over the copy of Unizombie, which is why I've actually dropped the Shiranui Solitaires in my particular build for the copy of white baking. We then play 2 copies of Jackabulin. Jackabulin's really good in the deck too because you can discard 1 zombie to special summon this card from your hand, and during your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you can target a zombie in either player's graveyard and special summon that monster, but banish it when it leaves field, and then banish this face-up card until the end phase, which is pretty good because it just gives you an additional monster on your side of the field, and gives you an additional cards to discard cards from your hand to the graveyard, because you're trying to set up your graveyard extremely quickly to be able to get your copy of your King of the Skull Servants attack as high as possible. So that's it for the zombie monsters. Let's get into the other cards that we're playing in the deck. So for the other monsters we're playing in the deck, we're playing a Danger package in the deck now, which I'm playing a single copy of Danger Nessie, and if you guys are unfamiliar with what the Danger cards do, you can reveal them in your hand. Your opponent randomly chooses any card in your hand and discards it to the graveyard, and then if it was the card that you discarded, they get an effect off. That, for instance, if I reveal Nessie and they hit the Nessie, I'll get an effect off, but if they don't hit the card, I get to special summon it to my side of the field and then draw a card, which is a really good effect. So we're just going to go over the effects of what happens when they're discarded. So what Nessie does, if this card is discarded, you get to add a Danger card from your deck to your hand, which is pretty good. I play double Mothman. Mothman is really good in the deck too because it's probably the easiest card to summon, and it's one of the only, it's probably the best one that's not at 1 right now. And what it basically does is you reveal it in your hand, and then your opponent randomly selects card, like we just said. And if it's discarded to the graveyard, you both draw a card and then both discard a card, which is pretty good because it's going to help you get cards into the graveyard and dig through the deck just a little bit faster. I play a single copy of Chupacabra. Chupacabra is pretty good because if it's discarded, then you get to special summon one of your danger monsters in the graveyard, which is pretty good just to be able to get you an additional danger on your side of the field. I play a single copy of Jackalope. Jackalope, if this card is discarded, then you get to special summon a danger monster from your deck in defense, which is pretty good. And a single copy of Tsuchinoko. Tsuchinoko or Danger Noodle is really good because this card is really, really good as an extender because if it's discarded, it just special summons itself. If they pick it, it special summons itself and you get to draw a card, but if they don't pick it, then you get to special summon it and draw a card. If they don't pick it, if they do pick it, it just special summons itself, which is pretty good to be able to just get you a card on your side of the field. It's probably one of the best ones and the easiest splashable danger card out of them all. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells, which we play very, 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 very few spells in this deck. So we're going to open up with a single copy of Monster Reborn. If you send one of your copies of your King of Skull Servants to the graveyard, then you get to special summon this card. You can special summon one of your copies of your Skull Servants from the graveyard, which is pretty cool, which is super helpful. We play a single copy of 1-for-1 because the majority of your Skull Servants are level 1 anyways. We play a single copy of Foolish Burial because sending your copy of any of your Skull Servant cards to the graveyard is really good. 1 copy of Burial from a different dimension because you can banish them pretty easily in this deck, and getting them back, this is basically says, hey, boost the attack of one of your King of the Skull Servants by 3,000. And then we play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness because this deck can dig through the deck ridiculously quickly and send cards to the graveyard, and even banishing your copies of, say, let's just say, for example, that you have a King of the Skull Servant in your hand. I'm going to show you a really quick cool combo with Allure. Let's say you have your copy of your King of the Skull Servant in your hand, and you have a copy of White Mare, that you draw a copy of White Mare off your copy of Allure. You can actually special summon that copy of King of the Skull Servants pretty much for free, because if you banish the King of the Skull Servants off the Allure, then you can use the copy of White Mare to be able to discard it to special summon this card back to your side of the field, and it starts out with 1,000 plus whatever you've already sent to the graveyard. So you basically got this card for free, and you drew 2 to be able to set up the graveyard, which is really, really awesome. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, I'm going to be playing a single copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. This card is pretty good in the deck. I don't think it's for every deck, but it's a pretty good card overall because it has the ability that you can also use 1 monster your opponent controls as a material to link summon this card. And this deck is not really concerned about the extra deck all that much, so I figured why not play it in the deck. But basically with this card, this link summon card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects, and unless they target this card, and then once per turn, your opponent activates a card or effect that special summons a monster from the graveyard, you can quick effect negate the activation as well. And also, you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls, which is a pretty good effect for Skull Servant, because you can actually use IP and a Link 2 to go into this card extremely easily, and be able to use an opponent's monster as well for the Link 5. We then play a single copy of Boral Sword because Boral Sword helps you OTK your opponent. We play a single copy of Appaloosa because it can give you additional negations. Access Code because it can give you additional pops. You don't have to play the access code if you don't want to. This deck does not require any of these cards in the extra deck. You don't have to play any of them because the majority of the deck is just basically going in with the main deck. So if there's any cards in the extra deck that you don't feel like you need or you can't afford, just don't even play them. Don't even worry about it. You can play Borreload if you want to play Borreload in this place. We'll play a single copy of Unicorn because it helps spin stuff. Phoenix because it pops spells and traps. I play a single copy of Needle Fiber because Needle Fiber is helpful in the deck because you can go with a copy of Unizombie with this and then get another Unizombie to your side of the field to help link climb, which is kind of nice. We play a single copy of Union Carrier. Union Carrier, it helps out a lot in the deck because it can help equip some of your Skull Servant monsters with other Skull Servant monsters, so I do kind of recommend the Union Carrier. We play a single copy of IP. IP I highly recommend. You do need to play the IP because IP helps you link into this card using any two non-link monsters, so you can use your normal Skull Servant monster to link into this. One copy of Link Rebo. Link Rebo is super helpful because I do recommend playing this because you can link away any of your level 1 monsters to link into Link Rebo and then protect your King of the Skull Servant from being attacked, which is kind of helpful. One copy of Relinquished Anima. This is another one I highly recommend that you play because this card can gobble up cards and any of your link or level 1s can link into this. One copy of Alamirage. Alamirage is really nice because you can normal summon at your White Prince and then link it away for any of these 3, which is pretty cool. And I like that added ability in the deck. One copy of Levenair the Sea Dragon. Levenair the Sea Dragon helps out a lot in the deck because it helps you summon this card to your side of the field using 2 level 3s. And then once you summon this card to your side of the field, you can bring back one of your banished cards to your side of the field. One copy of Borreload Savage. Borreload Savage comes up every so often, but I figured with all of these link monsters, why not drop it into the deck? It does come up every so often when I play test the deck, so it's why I play it as a one of in the deck. And then I play a single copy of Beals. Now, Beals is one of those cards I really recommend in the deck because it's really easy to summon out Beals because you can summon it out with something like a Mothman and a copy of Unizombie. If you open up both those cards, you essentially have a Beals for free, which is really nice to be able to get you a draw off of it. Send your Skull Servants from deck to grave, like White Prince, and be able to get 3 Skull Servants in the grave, and then immediately send your summon for Beals, and your opponent's going to have a really hard time getting past those cards. So, anyways, guys, that's it for the deck. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really cool deck to play with. I highly recommend if you guys have not played Skull Servants before, you definitely should. It's a very budget deck to play with, relatively. I would have to say it's probably really budget because the majority of stuff is common and it's been reprinted, which is really nice for the deck. So anyways, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of our notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.